I'd say there's a 5-stage process for this. Starts with finding out your budget, how much you can borrow. A second would be getting an offer accepted. Third one would be then submitting a mortgage application, and then you have to go through the legal work and then completion at the end. Hi, welcome back everyone. We're going to be talking to you about first-time buyers today. I'm David from Reside Mortgages, and I'm joined by
Darren,
Steve,
and I'm Ravash.
Perfect. So as I said, we're going to jump straight into it, discussing first-time buyers with you guys. Stephen, what is a first-time buyer?
A first-time buyer, David, is somebody who is buying a property for the very first time, having not owned one anywhere in the world.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So we're going to start off by discussing the process for first-time buyers. I'd say there's a 5-stage process for this. Starts with finding out your budget, how much you can borrow. A second would be getting an offer accepted. Third one would be then submitting a mortgage application, and then you have to go through the legal work and then completion at the end. So we'll kick off with the first section, which is finding out your budget. So Darren, do you want to discuss a bit about that?
yes, certainly, David. So with establishing your budget, you're going to want to speak to a mortgage broker. They'll be going through things such as your incoming, your outgoings, any credit commitments you might have, hire purchases, any loans you have. Essentially, they'll do an affordability assessment and provide you with that actual figure of how much you can borrow. That will allow you to go and understand what you can look at, whether it's a house, whether it's flat, basically in the area that you're looking. Often what helps is having an agreement in principle, which they'll be able to provide to you once they've done the affordability assessment and you're in a sort of position to get looking. Now it's important to understand that on the AIP, it will only confirm your borrowing figure. So what would go on top is your deposit. So as a plain example, if we're looking at a property of £200,000 and the maximum you're able to borrow is £180,000 and you have a £20,000 deposit, that provides your search budget of £200,000, whereas 20 grand is your 10% deposit on this purchase.
Cool.
Great.
Thanks, Darren. And just to cover off that, you said obviously speak to a broker. Why would you say it's important to speak to a broker to establish your maximum budget?
Yes, good question, David. So with speaking to a broker, they're going to be able to look at the whole market. So that means having a look at, some lenders might be allowing you to borrow £150,000, which might be an equivalent of 4 times your income. There's going to be some lenders that can obviously push that. So it's important that you speak to a broker so they can obviously find that all out for you and provide you a bit of a range of how much you can borrow depending on the lender.
Cool, perfect. And then you mentioned there an agreement in principle. What is that?
An agreement in principle provides you, it's like a document. It typically is valid for about 90 days. Most lenders do it on a soft credit check.
Cool.
They'll just do a light check on it. So it's not actually detriment to your actual credit score overall. And an estate agent, when you're making an offer, is going to want to have a look at this. So
Cool, perfect. Nice one. Anything else you guys want to add on maximising budget? I think Darren covered that off quite well, to be honest.
Yeah. I think
Cool.
on the using broker that you asked before, I think a broker provides a great deal of value because got to remember that broker actually works for you and not the lender. So it is in his best interest to
Or her.
hers to get your mortgage sorted, right? So other than the fact that they can look wider range of options, a broker can also advise you on the type of property that you're buying or a type of property that you wish to buy, whether it's a mortgageable property or not. Because often a time, it turns out that you really have a heart set on a property and then you apply and the lender declines because of X, Y, and Z, because the property isn't something that the lenders are keen to lend on. So if you have a relationship with broker, you can say like, hey, I'm looking to buy this property. What do you think? And he or she can assess the property and say like, okay, there are a range of options available for this kind of property or not.
Yeah, no, I think that brings us on to the next point. Obviously, we've established the budget. We've got our agreement in principle. Rav, do you want to cover off what happens next? Speaking to an estate agent, getting your offer accepted?
Yeah, so once you've spoken to a broker and having understood your budget, the next option is to go out on a property hunt. So often you'll go to your local estate agents and, advise them what's your budget or what type of property you're looking. You must, you ideally have listed your criteria around the property or the type of property that would be your ideal home, i.e. proximity to school, transport, proximity to shops, if anything. So depending on what your criteria for the property is, the estate agent will help you find a property. Other than that, most commonly you can go on Rightmove or Zoopla. On the Market is also another website where you can go and browse through the properties that are listed for sale in your area, and then you can contact those agent or sellers to express your wish to buy the property.
Cool, perfect. So Darren mentioned about getting your agreement in principle. Why is that important to show that to your estate agent?
Yeah, see, so when you go to an estate agent and say like, hey, I wish to view this property, or I wish to buy this property, the estate agent works for the seller.
Yep.
So they want to sell this property to someone who can actually buy. So often they would ask for this agreement in principle document, because that kind of shows your credit worthiness to the seller.
Makes you a serious buyer.
Makes you kind of a serious buyer, that you've spoken to a financial advisor, you kind of know your options, you know what your budget is, and there's a document to evidence that this is the property value that you can afford in your budget, basically.
So talking about budget, what would you say about disclosing your budget to the estate agent? Would you go in and let them know your maximum budget?
No, never ever, right? Again, like I said, you imagine you are in any negotiating conditions, right, or playing a game of poker. You never show your full hand, because once you show your full hand, you will never be able to scale down. So you want to start at the bottom and then raise your asking price, or negotiate upwards.
Yeah.
But if you show your hand, it just means that you're not gonna have an upper hand when it comes to negotiating.
Makes sense. And then in terms of the estate agent, still, what would you say if you've been organised, you've got your agreement in principle, you go to put your offer in, and the estate agent says you need to speak to our broker? They often have in-house brokers.
Yeah, many agents would have an in-house brokers, and there's no harm in speaking to an in-house broker. What you have to understand is they cannot force you to use the in-house broker. So by all means, if you want to have a chat, by all means, you can have a chat, but they cannot put a condition on the offer that I use our broker and will get your offer accepted. That is something very illegal, and something a lot of customers don't actually know, and they often get pressurized. Now, I'm not saying that all agents do that. Many reputable agents, many agents are reputable, and they would never do that.
Yeah.
But if you do come across, you can say that I have spoken to a broker, I have my financial vetted, I know what my budget is, and it's basically your choice.
Yep.
If you want to use, by all means you can, but you shouldn't be forced.
Yeah, I think the one important thing you said there is that the estate agent does work for the seller. At the end of the day, they're selling their home, so it's sometimes good to have a bit of neutrality, should I say? Is that a word? I think I've just made up a word there. So cool, perfect. You've got your budget, you've got your offer accepted. Steve, what happens next?
So offer accepted, give your broker a call, get back in touch with them. As brokers, we've already taken a lot of information from you to get your agreement in principle in place. We just need a few more bits, the finer details, things like your employer's address, more details about the property you're buying, what it is, how much it is, things like that. Once we've taken all that information, we're going to have a chat about the mortgage and what's going to suit you best in terms of your current situation, your future plans as well. There's lots of different products that we have access to. So we'll scale the market for you. We'll recommend the best deal available for you, and we'll go through the ins and the outs of that deal as well. We'll send over a lot of information for you to read. Any questions you have with that, get in touch with your broker, get in touch with us, whatever, to go over any questions. Once you're happy with the mortgage recommendation, we'll then submit the application to the lender. So that'll be a full credit check to the lender. They could ask for some income documentation just to prove, you earn what you say you earn. They'll underwrite the loan, so they're going to confirm who we're saying you are. They're going to check the property is worth what you're paying for it. And once they're happy with everything, they might have a couple of questions that we'll liaise with yourselves with, back and forth a little bit. Hopefully in an ideal world, it's not. It's just straight through to the offer stage. And then once they're happy with everything, they will offer the mortgage at the set amount for that set interest rate.
Cool. Thanks, Dave. Just a couple of questions there to add to that. How long would you say obviously you said you're going to get some information from the client, make a recommendation. How long would that take? How long would it take to get a recommendation over to a client?
So from having your offer accepted and from speaking to us as an example, we've been doing it quite a long time, where we can gather all the information and extract all the information we need in about 25 minutes to 35 minutes on a call, over a Zoom, however you want to play it. Yeah, so not long at all.
Cool, perfect. And then what could a customer expect when you've got that recommendation? Do they get any documents? How do you run through the recommendation with them?
Yeah, so we're gonna once we've found the mortgage that we're gonna recommend, we're gonna take out the key points and go over those with yourselves. Once we've been through everything and answered any initial questions you've got, we're gonna send over 2 documents. The first is called a key facts illustration, and it contains all the information that you're gonna need to know about that mortgage and that deal. But like I said, we'll extract the key information and go over that with you. Alongside the key facts illustration is going to be something called the evidence of research. So when we go to the market, we're going to recommend the deal against all of the other deals available, and we're going to send you the evidence of our research. So it's usually the top 50 deals, and we'll show you exactly where your deal is placed in amongst that table.
Perfect. How long would you then say you've done that? The client's happy with the recommendation. You've made the application to the lender. How long can that take for the lender to assess, underwrite, and issue the mortgage offer?
Yeah, very good question. Application to offer time is what we call it. It's very different from lender to lender. As you'd expect, the larger lenders are a lot quicker than the smaller lenders. So it can take anywhere from a day to 3 days with some of the larger lenders. But then the smaller lenders, you could be looking at on average 4 to 6 weeks for an offer time, because obviously there's a lot fewer people at these smaller building societies in general, so they're processing things on a longer scale essentially.
Cool, perfect. That's quite a bit of a time frame there, from one lender taking 3 days to 6 weeks.
It is.
Yeah.
Would you say that's a benefit of using a broker? If there are situations where speed is of the essence.
100%.
So obviously, if you need to move quickly, a broker can put you with a lender that will move quickly.
Exactly. Yeah, like you said, there's some instances where speed is going to be absolutely necessary. You're going to want it done as quickly as possible. It could be a last minute purchase. Someone's pulled out, you've jumped in with a great deal, something like that. Someone just needs to move quickly, in any circumstance like that. So with our knowledge, like we said, there's lenders that we'd look to in the first instance if time is of the essence, and we'd go straight there, versus a smaller lender with it might be the difference of a sort of a £4 or £5 a month in terms of cost, which you'd sacrifice, but in the grand scheme of things, that's probably quite important if you're looking for speed of service, right?
Perfect. And then just one last question on the application process. Something you mentioned about the lender value in the property. Like, what does that mean, and what does that entail?
Yeah, so a key part of the application is the valuation. So each lender is going to send out a surveyor on their behalf, and they're going to look at the property, and they're going to carry out something called a level 1 mortgage valuation, and it's simply going to confirm or conflict with the price that you're going to pay for the property. So they're going to value it, and they're going to check that it's worth the security for the bank's loan, basically, and confirm that what you're paying is what the property's worth.
Cool, perfect. Sorry to keep putting you on the spot. I've just got one more question.
Please.
The process, you've said that it seems quite straightforward. Would you say that all mortgage applications are straightforward, or can there be little hiccups that a broker can help you with?
No, it's the beauty of using a mortgage broker, because we've seen these things so many times before. No individual is the same. Obviously, being the word individual, no person is the same in terms of things like credit history, income, etc. Even the property you're buying can depend on the lender that we use. So there can be lots of hiccups along the way, but as long as you've got somebody on your side that is on your side exactly that, and with the knowledge that we can take to the market and find a lender that will accept your own individual circumstances, then brokers are worth their weight in gold.
Perfect. So I'll leave you alone now for a couple of minutes.
Thank you.
So after the mortgage application, you've got your mortgage offer. That's when the legals start to kick in. Darren, do you want to explain a bit more about the legals?
Certainly. So just going back to when you have your offer accepted, quite often these days, if you actually want to show that you're really serious, you might want to have a solicitor ready or have an idea of who you might be using. And that's the beauty of using a broker. Once again, like us, we'd be able to, maybe even on our initial chat, give you a bit of an indicative quote on what a solicitor cost might look like. They're often called conveyancers as well. And just in a nutshell, They specialise in transfer of a property. So it's another word for a solicitor, but yeah, it's often more to the point of what their role is in the whole of this transaction is that they essentially need to do all the legal work. So it's not as simple as you think. It's quite a lengthy process. They'll need to apply for things such as a local authority search. They want to make sure if there's any adverse charges on the property. Now, all of this might seem very confusing as a first-time buyer for you, but they are well equipped to explain everything that might seem a bit confusing for you. And yeah, that's essentially what they'll basically want to get you to the position where everything's all clear. Both parties, the seller and the buyer, are both happy with the whole transaction. And you want to get in a position where you can exchange contracts. But we'll touch on that.
Cool. Perfect. Thanks, Darren. How long, obviously you've said there's quite confusing and it really is. It's not something we specifically get involved in, but it's sort of where your solicitor does. How long would you say that process can take, getting the searches done, the draft contracts, etc., etc.?
Sure. So as first-time buyers, it's important to understand that you are literally at the bottom of the chain. You are where it all begins. So it depends on where you are. So if you're simply purchasing a property and it's just a one property transaction, the people that you're buying from are vacant. The property is completely vacant. They've moved on, or there's no reason for them to purchase another property. It could be as quick as 6 weeks, even quicker than that, depending on loads of different scenarios. However, if you are involved in quite a lengthy chain, as some of us have been in the past, whereas 4 or 5 properties, of course, everyone needs to be on the same page as the exchange, etc. All needs to happen at the same time. So it could be quite a lengthy process, and we're talking, 3-4 months. Potentially even longer.
Cool. Yeah. So would you say it's quite important to choose a good solicitor? That's sort of what things would you look out for when choosing a solicitor?
Communications, it's probably paramount when it comes to that. You need to make sure that you can access your solicitor if you have any queries, and they're basically going to be able to respond to you in a timely manner. Obviously, it's a little bit out of your hands, but it's important that you stay proactive. You chase the estate agents when you can't get hold of the seller's solicitors, for example. A lot of delays do happen where the seller solicitor's just not playing ball, or they're very slow with getting back to your solicitor. So that's the one thing I'd be in touch, be on top of your solicitors, as well as be on top of the estate agents in charge of it all.
Perfect.
I think a good solicitor would also do a lot of chasing on the other side of the solicitor as well.
Yeah.
So, I think yes, price of the solicitor is important, but at the same time, what level of service the solicitor is offering is even more important than the price, I would say.
Cool.
So
perfect. Thanks, Rev. So that brings us on to completion now. You've sort of got all your mortgage offer, the legals are in place. Rav, do you want to talk us through completion and what that means?
Yeah, so all this thing that you've been doing, you really want to get to a point where you can exchange contracts. Now, what really exchange of contract is, you have your mortgage offer sorted, your solicitor has done all the due diligence that he or she needs to do on your case, and it's all tick boxed. So there you come to a point where you want to exchange contracts. Now, why exchange of contracts is important? Let's understand that a little bit first. First of all, is up until you exchange your contracts, and this could take month, 2 months, depending on how long your legal work has gone. In this period of time, the seller can have a change of heart, and he could say like, "Hey, no longer want to sell the property." So you're back into square one.
Yep.
Right. So there's always a chance that you might have to redo the entire process all over again. Right. So you really want to get to an exchange of contracts. When you come to that point, you are basically committing 10% of your deposit for this purchase of property. It's normally 10%. It could be more or less depending on how you agree with your solicitor. But what it does, it makes you legally liable to purchase this property, right? And so for the seller, it makes them legally liable to sell this property to you. You can still both go either way, but there are costs and consequences that can be discussed.
Yep.
Right? So once you exchange your contracts, which means like, hey, here's my deposit, and your solicitor will start working towards a completion day, which could be literally on that day. So you could exchange and complete on the same day, or it could be a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depending on how you have agreed with the seller when you want to complete. When you decide a date of completion, that's the day when you become the legal owner of this property. okay, which means you get the keys to the property, you can move in on that day. That is also the day where your mortgage starts. Okay.
Is that when you start paying your mortgage or your mortgage
That's when your mortgage becomes active
Okay,
for
yeah.
you. And then depending on when you have set your direct debit for your mortgage payment, you'll be paying your mortgage payment
Yeah.
from that day onwards, basically.
It's normally the following month, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the interest is charged on the day that you complete, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then your first payment is always a little bit higher, isn't it, than what's quoted
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
in the actual
It can be.
mortgage broker because of that. Cool. And then obviously you exchange complete and get the keys to your house.
Correct. Yeah, you get your keys to your house, and then it's a blank canvas for you. So you basically
Get your paintbrushes out.
get your paintbrushes out, do whatever you need to do, bearing the cost, and eventually move into your property.
Cool. Perfect. Thanks for that. So I think that's quite comprehensive of the process. One thing I will mention is first-time buyers. It is what it says it is, as Stephen said, you're a first-time buyer, but lenders will sort of give you specific products from their mortgage range for first-time buyers. Doesn't really mean too much. The rates are normally pretty similar, but you might get a little incentive, like a little cashback or something like that. Again, it's always worth speaking to us or your mortgage broker about that. And just a little quirky thing, Steve said that first-time buyer, you haven't owned a property before, been named on a property. There is one lender that's a little bit quirky where I think they have a rule where if you haven't owned a property for 3 years, they will consider you as a first-time buyer. So again, it's always worth speaking to a
For their
mortgage broker.
products only, right?
Yeah, just for the actual mortgage products itself. Cool. So one thing that I'm conscious we haven't touched on is costs. Now, obviously, buying a property is probably going to be your most expensive purchase. You've got your mortgage, which you have to pay back in the form of your monthly payment. Some of the other costs that you're going to have to factor in are an arrangement fee or product fee, which is a fee that the lender will charge for the actual product. Depending on the lender or type of valuation you go for, there will often be a valuation fee. Legal fees, we've touched about the legal process, that comes with a cost as well. You're going to have to factor in moving costs. This varies. If you're moving out of mum and dad's, you might not have a lot of stuff to move. If you're moving from one to another, you're going to sort of have to move. So you have to factor in moving costs like vans, etc. And also stamp duty, which is quite an important cost. Which
Sometimes you have to factor in a broker's cost as well, right?
Yeah.
not with us though.
Not with us.
Not with us.
'Cause
Some brokers do charge, but not us. So just to cover off in a bit more detail, Steve, do you want to just give a quick summary about arrangement fees, what that is, when it's payable?
Yeah, arrangement fees are part of some lenders' fees whereby they'll charge you a fee, usually $999 or $995, and it's due on application for the mortgage. However, it's something you can add on to the mortgage, which we'd always advise doing in the case, in any instance where you might pull out of a purchase or pull out of the mortgage application. If you've paid a large fee up front, chasing down a refund can be a bit of a nightmare, trying to get it back from the lender.
When you add the fee to the mortgage, does that change anything with the mortgage?
Yeah, it does vary from lender to lender, that it can affect the application a little bit as well. Essentially, by adding it onto the mortgage, you are increasing the mortgage by the sum of the fee. So you're going to be paying interest on that amount. So a tip that we always advise clients is that where you can add the mortgage onto the fee, always do so for your own safety. But once the mortgage completes, it's best to just overpay by the sum of the fee, so you avoid paying interest on that extra amount as well.
Cool. And I assume you mean add the fee to the mortgage, not the mortgage to the fee.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Valuation fees. Darren, do you want to discuss that and sort of the different?
Yes, typically most lenders, as an incentive for taking a product out with them, they may have the valuation at free, but essentially this is a very basic mortgage valuation, as Steve touched on. It's just to make sure that you're purchasing for the correct price, and just making sure it's a secure, just to make sure it's adequate security
For the lender.
for the lender and how much you're purchasing for, of course. Now, as a first-time buyer, you may not be in the right working role to understand if there's any defects with a particular property when you're going out for a viewing. So you may just want to make sure that there is, the property is sound. So you may want to go for a level 2 survey, which was formerly known as a home buyer's report. It will provide you a traffic light system of how the property is and the condition it's in. If there's any minor defects, obviously there'll be some advice around that. Secondly, you may want to go for a full structural survey. Typically, this usually applies for properties that are quite old. So we're talking about Victorian era or any sort of listed buildings. So you may want to go for that just to make sure that there's no structural defects or anything like that. And they'll dive really deep into that sort of survey. So, yeah.
Cool. And I take it the costs for those vary dependent on the type and the detail.
Yeah,
of
so
the valuation.
the level 2 survey, it's in sort of the middle banding when it comes to the cost. Obviously, search online, it will vary depending on the surveyor, the surveying company that you look to use. A level 3 or full structural survey, as it used to be known, is typically the most expensive survey you could get. Yeah.
I think one key point there is obviously you want to try and keep your costs down. Some clients we speak to, they don't really want to pay that fee. But then if you move into the property and you find you need to rewire the property, you need to redo the heating, that will be more expensive. So it is always best to sort of find these things up front before you buy the property, because we have seen cases where that can be used to negotiate a discount on the price. If some lengthy work needs doing to the property, if there's a leaky roof, you can then factor it into your negotiations.
Good point, Dave.
So I would definitely consider one of those. But again, speak to your broker, as we always say. Other fees, Rav, legal fees. We've covered off legals, but
Yeah, other than the mortgage cost, then you have the cost of moving, which pretty much is the cost of solicitors, which you would have agreed before you engaged your solicitor. Typically that is paid at the end of your transaction. So when you complete, you'll pay the final balance to the solicitor, along with the stamp duty, which is the property tax by the government for purchasing the property. It's a one-off tax, but it's a cost that you need to bear in mind. Other than that, you have your moving cost. So think about like stuff that you have to move, hiring a movers, or if you are doing it yourself, bear that cost in mind. You're moving to brand new property, so changing locks, redoing your property like to your standards, repaint, all that kind of cosmetic work. So it's always advised to keep few £1,000s on the side other than your deposit, and not put all your savings into deposit. You ideally want to keep some money aside to cover for this kind of cost or any unexpected cost. You could be really unlucky, and that the day you move in, that's the day your boiler fails on you. So, bear that kind of cost in mind. Yeah.
Cool, perfect. Nothing more from me to add. I mean,
no, just to touch on
Darren,
regarding the solicitor cost. They might often ask for they call it money on account or funds on account, just so they can cover off like local authority searches or third-party costs that they'll need to have done. And if you're purchasing a flat, for example, there might be a leasehold pack that they'll need to go through, so it might come as an additional charge, hence why they might ask for some money on account.
Cool, perfect. Thanks, Darren. You've just popped something into my head there with leasehold. Obviously, with a leasehold property, there might be the added cost of a service charge and ground rent that you pay yearly. But again, that should be disclosed to you by your estate agent. Cool. Just to wrap up, what would you say if I asked each of you what was your one main tip or one main thing that a customer should focus on? What would you say, Rev?
Be organized.
Yep.
I would say as a first-time buyer, it's pretty new process to you. It could be daunting, but it doesn't have to be daunting as long as your documents are organized. So, go through your bank statements, make sure they have the correct address. They have, your deposit funds are not scattered over too many accounts. It's okay if it's scattered over too many accounts, but as long as you have the right level of paperwork, which is the standard paperwork, your IDs, your bank statements, your pay slips. So if you organize your financial life document-wise, it would be a lot smoother process for yourself.
Definitely, organization is key. Stephen?
Tip for first time buyer, I think invest in a solicitor, but also invest some time in finding a solicitor. Ask some family, friends for advice. Ask your broker. They can always help, but with solicitors, the most expensive isn't always the best, and the best isn't always the most expensive.
Yeah, preach. Darren?
Sounds a bit silly, but I was going to say, don't rely on loyalty. Say, for example, you bank with you've been with a bank for ages. Don't rely on them to be able to provide you a mortgage, because time and time again we come across scenarios where you've
Yep.
been declined by the bank that you actually bank with for 20 odd years. So it's always good to just speak to a broker. We're going to have a look at loads of different lenders for you, and naturally you might even get a better deal by
Yep.
going through with us. So yeah,
Yep.
definitely.
Makes sense. I think mine would be don't rush into anything. Obviously, you're buying a property, it's going to be your biggest financial purchase ever. You get a lot of people that they just rush into it, they see a property and they're not 100%. Just make sure you're 100% sure that this is a property. And I think 9 times out of 10, you'll know that when you walk in on a viewing, whether that's the one or not. So if you find that it's taken a little while to find the property you want to buy, don't worry, it will come. Cool. That was quite meaty. We'll wrap that one up there. Hopefully you guys found that helpful in terms of first-time buyers. Any questions, just message us. We're at www.residemortgages.com. And yeah, thanks for listening and we'll see you soon. Bye.